I think is very cool. Kevin has helped us so much, the Historic Pullman Foundation, over the last 6-8 years. We have always done a presentation on Lionel trains at Christmas time. Christmas and Lionel trains go hand in hand, goodness. And it's been so well received. The last one we did, we had 6 trains working different layouts, but they're the modular table, what somebody said basement type layouts, because we have to make it work in the space they gave us.
I have.
You have. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's becoming a Christmas classic. Well, the gentleman that directed it, Robert Zemeckis, lived about 4 blocks from here. He lived at 11326 South Edbrook. Now you will hear that address in the Polar Express, because as the train is going down, picking up the one kid, they go to the poor side of town. They pick up the waif, right?
Yeah.
This poor kid who has nothing, and the conductor, Tom Hanks, picks up the microphone, goes, next stop, 11326 South Edbrook. That's actually a house that's over on Edbrook. It's Robert Zemeckis' house. He grew up in Roseland. He hung out as a teenager in Pullman, and he graduated from Fender High School, class of '69, and went on to greatness, because he's not only directed this movie, but he's done Saving Private Ryan. He's done a number of big production movies, okay? So when it came time to do the animated version of the Polar Express, he wanted Pullman to be the backdrop for the North Pole. So they came out and they took pictures of what is the administration clock tower here on this page, and this is how it looks in animation. The clock tower is now a national monument, put in operation as a result of a proclamation by President Obama in 2015, and it opened for the first time in September of last year. So we had the grand opening. So that's part of the reason that, I've talked to Herb about this and Kevin. What I'm trying to do is to create a bridge, a liaison between the Chicagoland Lionel Train Club and the National Monument. That's why you're here, okay? Yes, I'm talking to them now, and they're somewhat interested in doing a layout that would be similar to this, using the theme of the Polar Express at Christmas time as a way to generate attendance, as a way to generate interest in the Pullman theme. So now, again, we're in the talking stage on this, and I'll certainly keep you abreast of it all, but I love what I hear from them. They're very interested in what we could do, even if it's a modular, set it up, break it down type of event. Now, let me explain who I am and how I got involved in this. Kevin and I have been policemen, and we started our career in 1973 out here in the Kensington district, which incorporated Roseland and the Pullman area. My first introduction to Pullman was rather unique, because as a rookie policeman, you have to work the wagon, the paddy wagon, and the reason it's called a paddy wagon, well, it's because they stuck 2 Irishmen on it that they didn't like, and the slang term for an Irishman is paddy, so
Yes, it is,
that
yeah.
became Paddy's wagon. So anyways, this guy passed away, natural causes, and I'm going into this Hotel Florence for the very first time. And we got the cart, and we're going up the stairs, and it smells of urine and smoke and cigar smoke. And we go up to about the 3rd floor, and the old boy's laying there, and he's gone. So we pick him up, put him on the cart, we travel down. Of course, I get stuck with the heavy end, because I'm the rookie. And as I'm coming down the stairs, I said to my partner, they ought to burn this place down. Years later, I meet a girl from Pullman. We get married in 1983. We lived in Beverly, beautiful condo. I had a wonderful janitor take care of everything I needed, but she wanted to move back to Pullman. So in 1984, we bought our first house in Pullman, and she got active in the Historical Society, ergo, that's why I'm here. Happy wife, happy life, all right? You guys know what I'm talking about. So, but I've seen the growth of what we've done here. We started to lobby for the national park. From the neighborhood, fly to Washington, go up on the hill and lobby. His name is Mike Szymanski, an architect. He lives across the street, been here since the 60s. He sat down and got Director Jarvis, who was the director of all the national parks in Washington. If you come to Pullman, we have a museum, an interpretive center, and we have a tour program you can have. When you hit the floor, you can hit the floor running. We'll give it to you. And they were impressed when they came down and saw what we had. And as a result, In 2015, President Obama came to what you guys might remember as Mendel High School, which is now Gwendolyn Brooks. Okay. By the way, Mendel High School was originally Pullman Tech. Yes, it was a high school that was built after the death of George Pullman as a result of $1.25 million that he left behind for the Pullman Free School of Manual Trade. A Pullman car uses every inch of space. It's designed that way. It's a remarkable piece of operational apparatus. The Pullman home that he was built here, and this was his town, had every inch of space was usable. It had to be, the way it was laid out. So Beeman, a young architect, was 26 years old. He got the contract to build Pullman, and you're going to see that these are all townhouses. They're joined, okay? Now, this wonderful 26-year-old architect had some exposure to Pullman before, so he knew what Pullman was like. Pullman was kind of a frugal guy, which means cheap. So when he laid out his plans and he shows them this design, the reason that Pullman liked the design is because there was no space between the houses. So therefore, he got more rental property on all the blocks. But there is an issue with fire coming out of the Great Chicago Fire. So the town was made out of brick. It had some amenities that other towns didn't have. We had operating skylights that were in the middle of the houses. Every house has this. You pull down a chain, it opens up. You can open up your first floor windows. You get the updraft. Air conditioning, 1881. Construction starts in 1880, first occupants 1881, fully operational by 1884, including at the same time the workers were building the town, they were building the factory. The street here was Marshall Field. And Marshall Field was very anti-union. And Marshall Field was a frequent dinner partner of Mr. Pullman, so therefore we think that's where Pullman got his anti-union kind of flavor to show you the wealth that Mr. Pullman had. Where did he get most of his money? Well, he started in New York. His family, he was one of 10, and his family raised houses out of the muck around Lake Erie to create a sewer system underneath it. He did the same thing here in Chicago in the Loop. That's how he got to Chicago, was a contract. While in Chicago, he heard during the Civil War, he heard about in Denver a great gold rush. So he goes out there and he makes a fortune in the gold rush, but he doesn't pan one nugget of gold. He set up a series of general stores and sold all the wares. So the man was a brilliant master of making money, to say the least. I think you could see that in him. Okay. These are pictures of his 4 children. Florence is the apple of his eye. She's the oldest girl. There's a girl named Harriet, number 2. His twin boys, George Jr. and Walter. George Jr. and Walter did become playboys. They live off of the trust fund. One dies of alcoholism, the other one gets thrown off of a horse. They were pretty much useless to Mr. Pullman, and he was very discouraged that they did not want to participate in the family fortune at all. Most of the family fortune went to this lady here, Florence Loudon. Florence certainly was the apple of his eye, and part of the reason was she was the oldest girl. She was the traveling companion to Mrs. Pullman, and I'm not sure what kind of marriage they had, but she used to take off in the summer and get out of town. She didn't like Chicago weather. There was a summer home in New York they had, but she'd also travel to Europe. And of course, the traveling partner.
She was smart, yeah.
Smart, yeah. Traveling partner, and of course, George, that just left him to his business of making more money, making train cars. Interesting facet about the train cars. So during his time and travel between Chicago and Denver, he's riding coach, and it's a tough coach. He's thinking there's a better way of doing this. He comes back to Chicago and starts to design his own rail car. All right. Okay. And really, he wants luxury now. So he starts to put it together, and he puts it on the Chicago to Alton line. Okay. But the car was taller, wider than any of the other cars, and therefore other rail lines didn't want to adapt to it because they would have to cut platforms and rearrange the stations. Abraham Lincoln dies, and the train from Washington with the casket on it comes through Chicago and has an overnight stay down on the Randolph Street station. Okay, people came and visited. Along the way, people just literally lined the rail line to see a glimpse of the casket of Abraham Lincoln. Pullman, never missing an opportunity, attaches his car, his luxury car, to the funeral train for the family. And that train goes from Chicago to Springfield, and when they found out about it, they had to quickly modify all the stations all the way to Springfield, Illinois. So that's how the standard became. Then all the other railroads adapted that size, height, and everything, became the standard of rail at the time. The man was a genius at how he manipulated things. To see this lady comes into play, Florence Loudon, who is the daughter to Florence, or the granddaughter of George Pullman. She comes back to Chicago, and she marries a doctor from the University of Chicago. And she's very philanthropic. So when it comes time for this neighborhood, the Hotel Florence, the flea bag hotel that I thought it was at the time, it's up for auction. The people in the neighborhood galvanized together. We got to buy this hotel. It's the anchor of our neighborhood. We can't let this fall into disrepair or get destroyed. So we only had one benefactor, and that's this lady here. She opened up her purse strings, and she also contacted her other philanthropic groups that she was involved in, and we were able to generate enough money to purchase the Hotel Florence. This is a landmark district. And once they attained landmark status by the city of Chicago, they couldn't tear it down. In perpetuity, this is a historical area. It cannot be torn down. Now, the drawback to that is, if there is that when you purchase a Pullman house, up until that point, you can make all sorts of moderations, and you could do to porch, you could put picture windows in. Once that happens, the front of the house becomes a registered landmark. You have to abide by the regulations. So you take the picture window out, you got to put double hung wooden windows in with the correct configuration. And you have to, people, instead of painting your house, we'd rather see you acid wash it and bring back that beautiful clay brick that you're going to see on the walking tour. You know, and you'd think people would object to it, but surprisingly people gravitated to doing it because they understood that if we pulled together on this and did this, everybody made that little bit of an investment in the front of their house, this would be a better neighborhood. So that's how we existed here. So it was through the efforts of the people here that created a historic district. When the hotel came and Mrs. Pullman here, or Mrs. Miller, gave us the funds to purchase the hotel, we were really on our way. But we didn't make it until Obama comes in 2015, in that February cold day, and he signed a proclamation making this a national park, and it actually belongs to the country now. So it's a national monument. I think it's as important as the Washington Monument. It may not be as tall, but to me. All right, I want to draw your attention to the building across the street. That is the Pullman Stables. And actually, you see the two horses' heads that are over there that are still around the main opening, the middle opening. Those are original, believe it or not. The Pullman Stables housed about 56 horses. There were delivery wagons that would be there. If you were affluent enough, and nobody was, to have a horse, you had to stable your horse in the stables here. But it was also a telegraph office and a barber shop, so it served other functions. One of the unique things was the fire department was there, and it was a volunteer fire department that was located inside. Pullman had two-wheel vehicles, fire hose vehicles that would be attached to a horse, and he had a four-wheel wagon that was so ornate that other fire departments from around used to come and take pictures of it. Oh, you're kidding. But we also have a photograph of the hearse that was here too, because, you know, hey, you gotta bury him. You're gonna marry him, you gotta bury him. So, you know, that's the rule.
You are so right.
So,
yes.
all right, let's get up. I hate to tell you that. World's Fair, to Chicago. But he's up against Congress, and they're telling him, hey, there's no way we're sending it to Chicago. There's nothing unique about Chicago. And he went back, he says, I gotta have a hook. I gotta have a reason for them to give us this great fair. So he realized that we needed to annex all sorts of neighborhoods. Hyde Park, Pullman, in about 1891, become part of the city of Chicago. Beverly, Morgan Park, all those are towns. Roseland, Rosemore, these are all towns that become part of the city of Chicago. And then Burnham goes back to Congress and says, you've got to give us this great fair because we are the second largest city in the United States. Yeah. He was up against New York, and they really couldn't fit it in New York, although St. Louis wanted it also and probably was the front runner. But when he started to lobby and say we're the second largest city, and that's where we get the name, Second City. It's really because we were the second.
Back in 1891 then.
Yes, but we weren't by population. Philadelphia and Boston had more. But by landmass, the amount of area we covered, we were the second largest city. All right, behind me, ladies and gentlemen, this is called Supervisor's Row. Sometimes it's also called Foreman's Row. So when you're elevated to the position of a foreman, you can afford a house like this, 3 stories tall, first floor, dining room, and a kitchen, and it's got 4 bedrooms, 1 bath. It's a very nice, and of course, it overlooks probably the nicest part of Pullman, because over there we would have had the arcade building, 3 stories tall, the big one. Now we lost the arcade building probably in the 1920s, though, are these buildings here, and these are all single family. But I like to point out this middle section over here. You see there's a walkway in between. Now these are all joined together, and that means there's more space per block, so there's more rent paid to Mr. Pullman per block. But being very cognizant of the 1871 Chicago fire, he made this town out of brick, and he did so with even the fire stops that are in the wall. It's a double brick wall, so that if one unit catches on fire, it doesn't go to the next. And that we call the space in between the houses like this, where it's a break, a fire. Trying to create a town where the worker would not want for anything, which meant what? If the worker was happy, what?
Better workers.
Better workers mean what for Mr. Pullman?
More
Production.
More money.
More money. So, and that business theme has been carried out for years. We'll paint the cars, you order your cars, we'll paint it whatever your color scheme is, but we slap the name Pullman car on it, that's a Pullman car. It has to come back here for repair. So therefore, when there were no orders of new cars, the repair shops the other side of the 111th Street here, from 111th to 115th, kept the company afloat with the repairs. Penn Central, New York Central, they would paint whatever color combination you wanted, but it was a lease agreement. And the best part of the lease agreement, the railroads had to pay for the repairs. So not only are you leasing the car and paying a fee, you got to pay for the repairs too. So he controlled that. Now, what causes the strike is the recession. There were 3 individuals who brought grievances forward, and they wanted to have a meet with Mr. Pullman. And they went down to the main offices, Jackson and Michigan. And when they got down there, they found that Mr. Pullman wasn't going to meet with them, but a vice president did. So they brought their grievances forward. He, the vice president, assured them, we're going to bring these grievances to Mr. Pullman. He's going to hear your voice. When they got back here to the factory, they were terminated. So that guild that was there, they walked out in support of them. And then another guild walked out, and another guild. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it was a walkout strike. It was not union, because they didn't belong to any union at that time. So they all walk out, and at that point, they close the gates of the factory, because now it becomes a lockout. They joined the American Railroad Union. Eugene Debs is the head of it. And the Congress that's there, the board of directors votes to support the workers here in Pullman and allow them into the union. Debs knows it's a losing proposition. At that point, it's a fledgling union. He did not want to take that union for that grievances forward and fight Mr. Pullman because of the political connections and clout and the money he had. He kind of knew it was a losing cause, but he did it anyways. As the strike evolves, May 11th, the strike occurs. By August 1st, it's over, it's done with. So it's not a long period of time. Okay, 3,500 workers from Pullman walk out the door. He hires about 1,200 scabs to take those jobs back. The strike gets broken because they started different guilds, different unions in other cities refused to unload any kind of rail car that had a Pullman car, any train that had a Pullman car on it. So it tied up all sorts of goods and services coming from the East Coast. Coming from the West Coast, we have produce rotting on the sides in these cars. It's because everything has to come through Chicago. So it starts a national trend, a national strike. The national word, these workers in New York, Philadelphia, Boston are all in support of the workers here. So it becomes an international or a national strike. So at this point then, they start to attach mail cars to the trains with Pullman cars. And it's a federal offense to impede the flow of mail. Grover Cleveland was the president, was a personal friend of Mr. Pullman. That's how they broke the strike. Eugene Debs ended up doing 6 months in McHenry County Jail for contempt of a federal order, court order, and Gompers along with him. The 2 of them ended up going to jail. But from the ashes of the strike becomes literally the AFL-CIO, a national labor force. The image of Mr. Pullman gets tarnished, although he tried to do something special. I mean, this is 140 years, this place is still here.
Exactly.
Tip your hat to that. Let me go forward and tell you that. There's other houses, and we'll see them like over here. There's porches that you'll see that do not have a roof. That tells me immediately that that's a low-end worker. Because if you're higher up in the company, you're going to have a porch that has a roof to it, like these. These houses get hot. People sit outside. Nice breeze. People walk up and down down the street. This is a social issue. It's a part of the social fabric of Pullman, certainly. Okay. So now, Tom McMahon was a skilled worker, and I lived over 11149, and I got promoted to a foreman. Boy, that's great. But I'm going to stay over at my house over here. Somebody from the company would approach Tom McMahon and say, Tom, you really need to live over here. No, I'm going to stay over here. No, Tom, you didn't get the memo. You need to move over here. Okay? Because as I got a raise in pay, they moved you into another location, so they got a raise in rent. So you're filling a vacancy of somebody here who probably went up or out. Either way, you got to pay more rent. You ain't going to stay there and pay that little bit of rent on that salary.
They weren't asking you, they were telling you.
They were telling you. Did you get the memo? Hey, let's Greenstone Church very quickly, okay? Now, it's not made out of red brick because George Pullman, and everything had a purpose. He wanted the church to jump out of all the other surroundings. So when you got off the train, you would look and say, what a beautiful area, arcade gardens. Then you have this gorgeous red brick Hotel Florence. And looming in the background, and by the way, that steeple's 5 times larger than it should be for a church of its size. That didn't happen by chance, that happened by design. That was the landmark for the residential area of Pullman. The other landmark for the manufacturing section of Pullman would be the National Monument. Yeah. All right, behind me is the Hotel Florence. Hotel Florence cost about behind us is the Hotel Florence. It cost about $110,000 to build. It cost another $35,000 to $40,000 to furnish. George Pullman had a private suite on the second floor on the north end. His suite and the other suite on this end are the only 2 rooms that had private baths. Other than that, the rooms were very nice. Ladies' parlor, which is what we call a front room, was basically for women to have their tea. There were some very large mirrors there and a bar. Now the bar here, if you lived in Pullman, you couldn't drink in the bar. You were banned. Oh, that was only for the guests of the hotel. And it was the only bar in Pullman. So across the viaduct over here, under the viaduct, 113th to 115th Street, became Saloon Alley. And I mean, it got so profitable, Schlitz and Pabst both bought buildings there and put their logos in brick above the saloons. So
Schlitz and Globe is still in that one building.
One building is still there, 114th on the corner, still there.
This is a meter reader back in the 70s and early 80s.
And the Schlitz delivery wagon stable is now a microbrewery. It's over there too on Forestville, or on Front Street. It's there. It's got the horses' heads on it. It's towards the alley. So it gives you an idea what life was like. Again, a little bit control. Another tidbit of interest. You had a foreman look at how you worked on the line. He judged you. He lived at the end of your block. And he also judged how you lived in Pullman. And if you didn't conform to those standards, you were given a slip and told to get out of town. You were fired. So you had to understand that you were watched while you were working, you were watched by the Pullman Company while you were living.
So this is where the workers went through to go to work.
Yeah.
As we are. The Pullman transfer table.
Wheels were what's on the rest. A flat car, flat bed was on top of that. Then it would be transported to different shops. But the car itself, how to explain it, but if this was the car, was this way, and it would move this way, go into a shop, come out, move forward into another shop. Still about 1901 or 1902, they built more shops down there to the other side of the railroad tracks to facilitate the length and the height of the new rail cars. So, but this then continued to be shops where material was made, transported over there for the cars, but the real making of the cars went over there, transfers over to their yards. Now that's the last remaining watchtower in the city of Chicago. In 1871, during the fire, almost every firehouse had a watchtower. It served 2 functions. One, all the hoses were made out of a linen substance, so you had to bring them up and hose them and hang them up to dry so that they grip dried. Otherwise, they would dry rot and not be very useful at the next fire. It also served a function because there was a map of the area, at least here. There was a map of the area with a device like this. And what it would do is you put the device on where the smoke is coming up, and it would give you the intersection.
Wow.
And then you'd clang, clang, clang the bell. The firemen come down the pole, put up the horses, hook up the horses. They'd go galloping to the fire, and on the way to the fire, they'd have to stop people on the street and go, "Hey, where's the fire?" That's how we got that slang. This is the upper berth that would fold down, and you'd have a step ladder, small step ladder that the Pullman porter would put out for you and help you into the bed. This would fold down into the lower berth. Then we would have from here, there would be a large curtain that would come down on both sides, give you privacy. So it's porter, then you'd leave your shoes out in the middle. He would shine your shoes. In the morning, he would get you up, give you time to get to the bath, to prepare. There was a little bit of a bathroom, but about the Pullman porter. Pullman porter separates the Pullman Palace Car Company from other companies. A lot of companies that were out there making Pullman cars, making sleeping cars, making dining cars. There was a lot of independents out there. But the Pullman Palace Car Company had African Americans working. Now, George thought of himself a little bit of a liberal. He went down south to New Orleans, Memphis, and Jackson, Mississippi to recruit people. He liked the southern drawl they had. And he used to recruit house slaves, those that had been involved in the service industry down south, to become Pullman porters. They had to be immaculately dressed, very clean, nails clean, everything. And he didn't pay them a lot. No, not at all. They made their money on tips, so they understood how good service would mean good salary, and they equated it. I call it doing the Pullman shuffle. They really took service to a whole nother level, which separated the Pullman Palace Car Company from other companies. So people would rather pay a few extra dollars to ride in a Pullman car because of the luxurious appointments, the way the car was shaped, and the service that was rendered. Order for the service he gave. And he wasn't paid well. He worked 20 hours a day. He slept for 4 hours, usually in the baggage car. His nickname was George because of the service he rendered. Nobody ever called him by his right name. But as he would go around, he'd say, well, "Excuse me, could you find my George for me?" Because I had one person assigned to me. A porter was assigned to my specific needs. And he serviced me from morning till dusk, and then he slept after he shined my shoes and prepared everything for me the next morning. He might get 4 hours of sleep. He worked on a line. He might take 10 days to go out to Seattle or Portland, pick up another train, and come back. So he was absent from the home for quite a bit, but he was a hard-working individual. Mr. Sessions patented for the Pullman Palace Car Company two very important inventions. One was a coupler that had shock absorbers on it. Because before that, the hooking up of these cars was so violent that some goods that would be broken or perishables would be damaged before they got to market. So the shock absorber reduced that. But what he's really known for is the vestibule between the passenger cars, like a tube that came out would allow you to go from one car to the next without being exposed to the elements. Now, what was that so important, having patents? Pullman made a small fortune on patents because other railroads used these items, but they had to pay the Pullman Palace Car Company for the use of the patent. So he was, he had over 100 different patents out there that were being utilized by other railroads at the time. Another source of revenue for the man. The man was a genius at making money. We had to do the same thing.
Well, Tom, thank you very much for this tour.
You're welcome, Herb. Thank you. Thanks for coming out. I don't have a lot of railroad stuff, but I got the story of Pullman.
You do.
The Polar Express. It's becoming a Christmas classic. Well, the gentleman that directed it, Robert Zemeckis, lived about 4 blocks from here. He lived at 11326 South Edbrook. Now, you will hear that address in the Polar Express because as the train is going down, picking up the one kid, they go to the poor side of town. They pick up the waif, right? This poor kid who has nothing. And the conductor, Tom Hanks, picks up the microphone, goes, "Next stop, 11326 South Edbrook." That's actually a house that's over on Edbrook. It's Robert Zemeckis' house. He grew up in Roseland. He hung out as a teenager in Pullman. And he graduated from Fender High School, class of '69, and went on to greatness because he's not only directed this movie, but he's done Saving Private Ryan. He's done a number of big production movies.